refugees fleeing through Hungary. Eastern European communism is undergoing its biggest test. And at the same time, the man in the center of the action, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, is himself on probation. Reformists like Boris Yeltsin tug from the left, demanding ever more freedom. While at the same time, conservatives like Igor Ligachev threaten from the right, voicing caution and restraint. And in the midst of this political tug-of-war, both sides cast a nervous eye at the Ukraine, the biggest of the non-Russian republics, where nationalism is stirring and where a political blow-up could lead to economic disaster. And it is economics which everyone fears the most. For without food or supplies, revolution is never far behind.
Elia Gerol, you're just back from the country in which you were born, as well as being in Poland. Is Gorbachev, in your view, as vulnerable as people in the West are suggesting?
I think that Gorbachev himself asks the same question, particularly today, tonight, because tomorrow the party Central Committee plenum in Moscow, which will decide the national ethnic problem, one of the most important and painful problems the Soviet Union is going through and has to solve, and the second, probably the fate of Gorbachev himself. Yes, he is vulnerable. The degree of his vulnerability is difficult to predict today. Tomorrow it will be easier. But I do agree with Boris Yeltsin, the leader of Soviet radical movement, radical movement within the Communist Party, that 6 months, 8 months, that all what Gorbachev has, if the country will not be fed, not properly, but at least somehow, if the ethnic problems will continue to be on the edge of civil war as they are now, I suppose his days are counted.
But, I mean, is it possible to solve those problems, particularly the economic problems, in 6 or 8 months?
You can't solve the economic problems in 6 months. You can't solve them in 5 years, as Gorbachev reign proved. But you can define the directions, which will say to people, yes, we do care. The government says to people, we do care about your welfare more than we care about the prestige of a superpower, let's say. And our directions will be the following. We will decentralize the country, we'll give free incentive, we'll give every republic and every province the economic self-determination and status of, let's say, at least of the provinces of Canada, let's say. Then these directions will inject a certain optimism in the country, which now is in the most depressive, pessimistic move ever since the end of the Civil War. I think it's somewhere between Civil War and Civil War. That's how we can define the Soviet history now. And Gorbachev is presiding over this total disintegration of the country and of its economy.
He's got, as you mentioned, the so-called radicals, the people who want even more rapid changes. On one side, he's got the conservatives who are saying things have gone too far. On the other side now, does that help him in a way, in that vis-a-vis the conservatives, he stands as the moderate in the middle, able to say, look, you need me, because the radicals want to go even further than I do?
It did help him initially. Initially, he was a supreme judge between the conservatives, who wanted to slow down the reforms and to keep the apparatus system intact, and the reformists, the radicals, who wanted to dismantle the system immediately. It worked. It doesn't work anymore. Today he has to side with someone, because without this, the stagnation continues, and the Gorbachev will be chosen as a scapegoat for both sides.
Where is he going to side, in your view?
He's going to side with the left wing. He's going to side with people like Yeltsin. I actually see Yeltsin, and I know it sounds today rather strange, but I see Yeltsin as a man number 2 in Gorbachev hierarchy, which will be formed during next year, if not man number 1, which is also possible. There are rumors in Moscow, and I spoke to just a week ago to the high-ranking officials and to their advisors. It's almost certain that in the nearest 5 months, Gorbachev will resign from the post of Secretary General of the party and will concentrate on the post of the President of the state. Tactically, it sounds good for Gorbachev, which then could consolidate the main center of power, the Supreme Soviet, which he wants. But the Soviet history showed that those who run the party sooner or later run the picture. That's why it is dangerous. And I will give you an example which was not noticed by the Western media, to my greatest surprise. I wrote it in the Ottawa Citizen about it, but I want to restate this again. When Gorbachev was on his holiday, on his vacation, I was in Moscow at that time, and every day I switched on TV, and every day I saw the face of Ligachev,
The leader of the conservative
who
movement.
who was man number 2 and leader of the Conservatives, and was pushed to place number 5 in the Politburo. And every time when Gorbachev goes on vacation, Ligachev goes up and comes to TV and promotes his views. This time he was on TV every day. Don't forget, the Soviet TV is a state-owned, party-owned and state-owned system. Somebody organized it. So Ligachev was on TV every day, telling the old-fashioned stories that you have to work harder and then everything will be all right, and collective farms are beautiful and look like in German Democratic Republic they have collective farms and they feed their population in the cows.
But what are the conservatives most concerned about? I mean, is it Poland, for example? Is it Hungary allowing the East Germans to flee? Is it the independence movements in the republics? What is their primary
I know that
concern
we call
right
them
now?
conservatives because of our Western style to
hardliners.
clicheize everything and to have a cliche here and cliche there. They're not conservatives. They are also actually reformers, but they are reformers of the cosmetic side, of the facade. They are concerned with one very practical and decided issue. They are the party apparatus. 5 million people, party secretaries, want to eat as they ate before, for free. Want to have everything for free. Want to run the country, not even looking whether it will be good for the economy or bad for the economy, it will be good for them. These people, 5 million people, plus the system which serves them, don't want to dismantle the whole apparatus which feeds them. That is their main concern, and that is a very important concern, much more than any ideology. People who want to stay in power. Gorbachev doesn't have such apparatus. He's alone. He's supported by some idealists like Shevardnadze or Yakovlev, the former Soviet ambassador to Canada, who is man number 2 now in the Gorbachev hierarchy, but he is alone. He's supported by intellectuals who never were a decisive force.
Okay, so how does he overcome that power structure?
In 6 months, these people, Ligachev and others, will come to Gorbachev, if not tomorrow in the plenum, and they'll say, look, we supported you. We gave you every possibility to do whatever you want, to dismantle our centralized system, to dismantle our foreign trade centralized, to give Poland and Hungary full freedom to do what they want. What do we get? What did we get for it? We got, they will say, Poland, non-communist country. Hungary is almost an enemy. Look what they did to East Germans. We are dismantling the Warsaw Pact, and we are vulnerable against the West today. We have nothing to eat anyway. We don't have soap. That's it.
Well, we still haven't addressed how he overcomes this.
How he overcomes this? Only by one direction. To go radically ahead. The reforms, either you do reforms to the bitter end or you don't start. He started, but he doesn't continue that. He has to go to the bitter end. He has to crush conservatives. He has to dismantle collective farms. He has to give land back to peasants. And he has to say goodbye to socialism in the Soviet style openly. He can do it. Will he? It's a question.
Okay, we're going to come back and we're going to carry on this discussion and particularly look at the independence movements in the Baltic states within the Soviet Union when we return. Please. Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev knows how to ride a tiger. Facing tough criticism of his reforms by hardliners in Moscow, he cut short his vacation to try to take control of his political jungle. For instance, he quickly reaffirmed his commitment to pushing ahead with regional economic autonomy for the Baltic states. But will that personal push by Gorbachev translate into lasting action? Joining Ilya and myself now is Al Yuzukonis of the Baltic Federation of Canada. And Al, can there be economic autonomy in the Baltic states, in Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, without political autonomy? And does political autonomy mean political independence?
It's like the old question of which comes first, the chicken or the egg. I personally think that What is happening now is that there is a modicum of political autonomy already in the Baltic states. The popular fronts in Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, in effect, are the second governments and have an immense sway over the existing governments and what they're doing and saying. I think that one of the crucial issues that they're trying to deal with is the economic autonomy, and I think that they have the opportunity to establish economic autonomy, and from that move to even greater political autonomy.
But I mean, I guess the big question here, particularly with regard, I mean, we know how far the conservatives are prepared to go, or how close they're prepared to stay. Do we know how far Gorbachev himself is prepared to go in terms of things like independence, autonomy for the Baltic states?
I don't think anybody really has the answer to that, except that I've heard often quoted by people within the Baltic states that Gorbachev himself is, to paraphrase Winston Churchill, he's not there to preside over the dissolution of the empire. And I think that's absolutely clear. I think that what in many ways has happened is that Gorbachev himself doesn't know where it's all going. He's thrown up a lot of balls in the air.
I am not so sure that he doesn't know where he's going. I suppose he doesn't have the field for maneuver. Gorbachev actually is not important so much what thinks Gorbachev today, as it sounds very, very important. Things are how far the Baltic establishments, and they are totally different establishments. You can't equal Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia, as we used to say in the West, the Balts. The Balts don't exist. There are three nations. How far their People's Fronts, their national establishments, and their minorities are prepared to go. And my view is that they're prepared to go too fast, too extreme, and therefore they will lose.
For Gorbachev personally, too fast for him personally, or too fast for him given his political struggle?
I would say forget about Gorbachev for a moment. It doesn't matter for Gorbachev or not. What matters is for the republics. They decide how far they will go, and Gorbachev will have to react, not to decide. And Latvia particularly, I suppose the main problem is Latvia today. In Lithuania, with a small Russian minority,
very small,
21%, and we have Poles 5%, I think, yeah? 7% of Poles. These minorities will cope and will cooperate with the Lithuanian national movement somehow, although with big problems. In Latvia, where non-Latvians are more than 50%, it's much more difficult to deal. And Latvian People's Front, unfortunately, and I say it with certain pain in my heart because the leaders of the People's Front are my personal friends, like Diane Stevens, the president of the People's Front. I was born in Riga, and I talk to them often. On the level of the top of People's Front, they say, yes, we understand that minorities are so important. We understand that future Latvia, independent or autonomous, will live together in one family. But on the level of a bus, as they say, of a store, it's a near civil war situation. It's turned into racism. Latvian People's Front newspaper Atmoda writes about biological deficiency of Russian brain.
Well, I think
it's very dangerous.
I understand what you're saying, Ilya, in terms of that, and I think that there are probably some manifestations of those types of things in maybe in all three Baltic republics. But I think one has to understand the context in which this is all happening. I think that's extremely important. What you're seeing is a process of nation building right now going on in the Baltic states. That nation building is not without its problems, and nothing is ideal and nothing is perfect. I think coming back to your original question of how far they're going to go, I think one of the clear things that everybody has to understand about what's happening in the Baltic states is that the population has become politicized. It's a movement that's coming from the bottom. It's not a movement that's being imposed from the top by a group of intellectual or academic thinkers, in contrast possibly to Czechoslovakia in '68, probably more like Poland in '80 or '81 when Solidarity formed, when Solidarność came up. I think that that's the ultimate and most important aspect of what's going on in the Baltic states. And that movement, if I can just finish here, that movement at the bottom, coming from the bottom, is driving the leadership. They have very few options in terms of trying to satisfy their constituencies, the people on the street.
The basic question is where they go. And where they go, do they say, yes, we will be independent day after tomorrow, as some of them say, some movement for independence. In Latvia, in Lithuania, is a separate movement, separate and separatist movement. supported by a mass of people. If they go straight independent, they are in danger. No one empire or federation or even, we know, much closer to our home situation will go for disintegration on the spot without resistance. But in Latvia, particularly in Estonia too, not in Lithuania so much, the things turn racist. The things are turning from social and national problem into problem of racial confrontation. If a Latvian writer, a member of a People's Front, comes to TV and says that we should propose a bill to ban mixed marriages, we are in trouble. That means I don't see how the West here will support the movement which will ban mixed marriages. South Africa just canceled the ban, and in Latvia they want to introduce it. I mean, it sounds a lot of stupidities, a lot of little things, but altogether they create atmosphere of racial tensions, which are used by those in the Soviet Union who want to stop the nationalist movement there, the national movement.
They say we
there.
have to come in and protect the
Sure,
Russian minority.
Sure. And that is very Russian, not minority. It's a huge group of people. And when the demonstrations come under the slogan, they all carry a slogan, Russians out. 50% of the population out. This is not the people who came on tanks. It's people who are born there. They're just ethnic Russians. So I think one liberation movement today can exist without the support of the West. And they are losing the support of the West because they don't think about consequences.
I'm not sure I entirely agree that they're losing the support of the West. I think that's another situation entirely as to how much they really rely on Western support now.
They should.
They may very well be erroneous in that. They may want to do more than that. They may be looking for more support. But I think what you're doing is, what you're looking at right now, is particularly in Latvia, is you have a siege mentality, a desperation building. You have a people who are afraid of disappearing, of dying out, of being annihilated, whether through cultural or whatever many forms of genocide. And I think that that's coloring their decisions in many ways. And I think there's a lot of sympathy in the West for the way the Balts have been treated. The Balts are the orphans of the Second World War, more so than any other country probably in the world. They're the only countries that lost their independence, lost their statehood after the Second World War. None of the other countries did. They exist in some form or another.
Those before. Those were before Second World War.
Well, they lost it in 40.
Yeah, those in 1940, I mean, not after the war. That is the very important question which is now in the center, in the epicenter of all fights. Yes, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania were occupied by the Soviet Union because of Ribbentrop-Molotov Treaty. That is true. And they were illegitimately occupied and illegitimately were pushed into the Soviet Union. But what about the Second World War? After that was a war. The war ended with the victory of one side. So the question is on what side they were then. If they were on the side of anti-Hitler coalition, they were liberated. So there is a very important judicial question.
Okay, but let's not get into that. We're almost running out of time, but I don't want to sound simplistic here, but is it simplistic to ask whether you foresee a situation where the Soviet Union would send in troops to the Baltic states?
I think everybody fears that. And
I think it's possible.
And everybody feels it's possible. They themselves feel it's possible. Last week, we got a panic phone call saying that there were tanks on the streets in Riga, and it was just simply another military maneuver. But that's the type of sense of panic and psychological terror that's going through people. But I think that what they're saying too is that the Baltic states are the example, are the model of perestroika and glasnost in the Soviet Union. If they work, there is some possibility for it working throughout the rest of the Soviet Union. And if tanks move in, that's it.
In the Soviet Union, but not without it.
There's a question we could debate for another hour.
The slower they will go ahead, the less possibility that tanks will move in.
All three of the movements, regardless of some of the more possibly outlandish statements they make, are taking a gradual evolutionary approach to freedom, independence. And I think that's the path they're going to follow. And I think in 5 years' time, you'll see independent Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia.
I don't think so, but the movement in that direction it is. And maybe 20 years, we'll see autonomous Baltic republics within the Confederation.
Okay, thank you very much, both of you, for being here. It's a fascinating discussion, and I'm sure we'll attack it sometime again. When we come back, a documentary